Tennessee Life is supported through the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you. Coming up on Tennessee Life, we meet Officer Scott Bauer, a game warden with a passion for wildlife and advice for future generations of hunters.
We need hunters out there, but we just need people that are going to do it right. I just hope that we can pass along the passion that some of us have for these animals.
Hohenwald may be a small town, but they have some larger-than-life residents. We visit the elephant sanctuary to get a look at what makes their herd feel at home.
A typical day for an elephant, the majority, the biggest chunk of it is spent acting wild, foraging, looking for food, playing in one of our ponds, interacting with other elephants, lying down, taking a nap, just exploring.
Tellico trout don't grow on trees. They're raised in a hatchery. Meet biologist Jonathan Ellis, the man who oversees the stocking of this East Tennessee fishing oasis.
I like knowing that we have given families and individuals a day of their life. They have landed the best fish of their life, and they've come up here and caught nothing and just had a great day with their family. So, I mean, it's really the most gratifying part of my job.
Those stories next on Tennessee Life.
Thanks for joining us for this animal edition of Tennessee Life. I'm Vicki Lawson. Scott Bauer is a game warden with the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency who has turned his passion for nature into a career. We met with Scott outside of Clarksville to learn about his relationship with wildlife and what he hopes for the future generation of hunters in our state.
What got me into hunting first when I was a child was my father. I think I was 10 years old. He took me out in the deer stand for the first time, and I actually got to harvest my first deer ever. For a 10-year-old, that was a big experience, but getting out there and just being with nature, it really talked to my soul. And my father taught me the correct laws and what not to do. And the biggest thing I like to say is what Aldo Leopold said in some of his books, is to do the right thing when no one's watching. And that's something that I live by. When you're out in the woods, no one's watching you. It's just you and nature and God. And I mean, when you can sit out there and just take it all in and be alone, you always want to do the right thing. My name is Scott Bauer. I'm a wildlife officer for the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. So when I first started hunting, everybody goes through phases. And as a game warden, we teach this in hunter education, that each phase you go through, you gain more respect for the animals. You change as a hunter. Your method, you shoot a deer with an archery with a bow and arrow, then you shoot a deer with a muzzleloader, then you shoot a deer with a high-powered rifle. You go through those phases. So when I was young and I was 10, I started those phases out. And as I went along, I think I turned 16, I believe it was, I shot my first deer ever with a bow and arrow. And that right there, I can think back, it started so many things for me. With a bow and arrow, the deer has to be close, very close to you. And so you get that different sense of nature with, you're so close to the animal. It's something you don't just see on TV. You can't get that feeling. You have to go out there in the woods and get it. And it actually opened up another whole door for me. I started photography at that time and really appreciating wildlife for more than just putting food on the table. It was, I could pass this on to future generations, pass it on to loved ones. I went out and I started photographing everything I could find. And when I was working, I'd be taking pictures of songbirds and whatever wildlife I could. And I just love being able to share those images, and also for myself. There might be days where we are stuck in the city and we're sitting in traffic. And I'm sitting at a desk, for example. I can look at that photo that I took, years ago of a beautiful songbird or a deer out in the wild. And I can take myself and put myself back in the woods at that moment. And that's what I like. It's that zen feeling, that stress relief. And that's why I go outdoors, is to just lose all the stress and the headache of life and just focus on what was here before us. Hunting is such a widespread thing that, it's been here for a long time, way before we were around. And it's something that we cannot see go away. We have to have hunting. And I don't just mean hunting. We need conservation. We have to manage them, because in the long run, if we don't, we'll be overrun with them. They will eat themselves out of house and home, and we can't allow that. We can help them help themselves. When it comes to lawmaking and regulations, a lot of times we look back in history. Well, why did the population go down 40 years ago? Why did it come up 20 years ago? And so we try to use the past to help us in the future, and we change the laws. So for example, 2 years ago you could harvest 4 turkeys. Now you can only harvest 3. And the reason why we changed that regulation was to protect the turkey so that we can continue to hunt it in 40 years, because the wild turkey is a precious resource, and we had none in the state of Tennessee for the longest time. So now hunters, yes, you can still harvest 3, but if you combine that with 10,000 hunters, there's a lot more turkeys out there now. So it's a balance. All in all, it is just a balance between humans and wildlife, and making sure that everybody is happy, but also we're keeping the wildlife here and keep them happy. Otherwise, our children will never get to even experience it. It's not a sport. There's more to it. So for an anti-hunter or someone who's never hunted before, it's hard for them to understand why we do what we do. If I harvest an animal, it actually does take a lot out of me as a human being. I feel connected to the wildlife now, and so to truly harvest one and end its life, it means more to me than a lot of people would ever understand. And so I think to myself again that I'm managing the herd, I'm keeping a healthy herd. Believe it or not, I'm keeping them healthy by doing so. It's the circle of life, and it's something that's been going on forever. We have to do it. So for someone that doesn't understand that, I'd be glad to say, hey, come out with me, experience what I've experienced. And I've actually done that. As a wildlife officer, as a hunter, I've gotten people into it. A lot of juveniles I've taken a lot out hunting.
Yeah, if y'all are out there, you ain't ever been turkey hunting, go. It's fun stuff.
What do you think about this compared to deer hunting? A little more exciting?
Yeah, a little more exciting.
My fiance, for example, she's from Florida. She's never hunted in her life. And I took her out for the first time turkey hunting, and she loves it. She comes out, and a lot of times we have a video camera or a camera instead of a firearm. We'll just go out and we'll take photos of deer and turkeys. And we say we're gonna go shoot deer. Well, it's just with a camera. And then I can take that home and I can share that. It's not always about harvesting an animal. And that's something that we as sportsmen, and I'm not a hunter, I'm a sportsman, that we like to share, that this is a beautiful thing actually. It's not ugly. We need hunters out there, but we just need people that are gonna do it right. I just hope that we can pass along the passion that some of us have for these animals. I hope our future generation is smart and safe, and they have the biology side in their brain, that they focus on keeping our wildlife healthy, not over harvesting, but realizing that we have to have this management in there. I want the deer to have every advantage physically possible. I hunt with a longbow, for example, and I love the thought that I don't have the advantage anymore. And just recently, about a week ago, I was very, very blessed and very lucky enough to finish the story on a deer that I had been hunting and chasing for 2 years. Last year I found him on my trail camera. I saw him out in the woods, so I let him grow to the next year. I found his shed antler, he dropped an antler, I found it, and that created that history with that animal. And to me, that changed everything. There's so much more to hunting when you can have a story behind it. So, this one deer became an achievement for me. I went out there with a chainsaw and I did a lot of hinge cutting. I created bedding areas. I created food plots. I put, some browse on the ground for them that they could eat year round. I created this home for these animals that not only will benefit them, but benefit me. So after all this history was created, I've been hunting him this year, and I've seen him multiple times, but I couldn't get close enough because my bow and arrow, I can only shoot 25 yards. And just a week ago today, actually, I was lucky enough, and he came in at 15 yards, and I got to shoot him with my longbow, and it was a feeling like no other. No matter what, this deer, it could have been a world record, or it could have been the smallest deer in the world. This deer meant so much more to me than a score or a number or how many points he had on his antlers. So I waited, I sat in the tree stand for a couple hours. This is what's most important about this story. The first person that I called on my phone was my father. The person that brought me into the woods in the first place, that got me into hunting and conservation, and I'm here as a game warden now, was my father. So I called him first. I told him everything that was going on. He calmed me down because he knew how excited I was and nervous, and we talked it out for about 2 hours. He said, just stay in the stand. And he brought me into it at 10 years old, and now at 31, he's the first person I call every time. And we talked it out. He was 4.5 hours away in Missouri, but believe it or not, he got in the truck and he drove down, and he got here at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He wanted to be a part of it, and that was awesome. And that's what I'd like to do with my children one day is get them out in the woods and just let them experience what I've experienced my entire life.
Later on Tennessee Life, we go behind the scenes at the Tellico Trout Hatchery, where the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency works year-round to keep fish populations thriving. But first, we meet a pack of pachyderms who are helping to educate visitors to Lewis County.
They may not be from around here, but the elephants at the Elephant Sanctuary in Lewis County have made themselves at home. We made a stop in Hohenwald to see what lessons can be learned from these gentle giants.
A lot of towns have a gas station, a lot of towns have a restaurant, a lot of towns have a shoe store. Not every town has an elephant sanctuary, and so there is a bit of a novelty to it. My name is Todd Montgomery. I'm the Senior Manager of External Relations here at the Elephant Sanctuary in Tennessee, and I've been here for about 8.5 years now. So the Elephant Sanctuary is a 3,060-acre facility located in Lewis County, Tennessee, that is a home for 10 elephants that are retired from performance and exhibition. There are different sub-habitats for Asian elephants and for African elephants, and that entire space is maintained by a team of caregivers. The Elephant Sanctuary was founded in 1995 by two people, Carol Buckley and Scott Blaze, and they were the owners of an elephant named TWRA. And TWRA, like many elephants, had been brought to the United States from the wild at a very, very young age. I believe when she was about 2 years old. They became a performing team. As TWRA got older, her owners realized that life just wasn't the best fit for her, and they set about creating a place where TWRA could retire. And that idea in time turned into the Elephant Sanctuary. And from one elephant or herd, our population grew to include another elephant, then another, and then eventually we had 28 elephants that have lived with us since 1995. 10 of them are with us now, and hopefully more to come. The official mission is twofold. The Elephant Sanctuary exists to provide individualized care in a natural habitat refuge, and also educate the public about why that's important, about the needs of elephants in captivity, and the value of elephants as a keystone species in the wild, how crucial elephants are in our planet's overall health. A keystone species is any species of plant or animal that has a profound impact on every living thing around it. Elephants dig in the ground, looking for water, establishing a mud wallow. That mud wallow in turn becomes a source of drinking water for several other animals. The grasses that grow along the edge of that mud wallow in turn become habitats for insects and different species of birds. Amphibians will lay their eggs in the water of that elephant-created watering hole, and then it becomes a nursery ground. So the elephant, through their digging, creating a mud wallow and a watering hole, they create a cornerstone of their natural habitat that is utilized by so many other animals. The elephants here have sort of integrated themselves as a member of that ecosystem. So yeah, we do see the deer drinking from the elephant mud wallows. Even more commonly, we see turtles and frogs that have taken up residence around the wallows and the ponds. And so another little way that the ecosystem that we see here maybe isn't exactly a replica of what you have in the wild, but it's still pretty fascinating to see how our sanctuary ecosystem has really grown with the elephants as a centerpiece. A lot of people don't realize this, but in the wild, Asian elephant populations exist in the wild all the way from, southern India and in Sri Lanka and Indonesia, areas that we would think of as being more almost subtropical. But wild elephants also live all the way north into the Himalayan foothills. So the climate that we have here in terms of the length of the warmer season, the rainfall, the vegetation, obviously it's not exactly what an elephant would have, but it's a close enough approximation. And also, of course, we live in a very rural area. To have an elephant sanctuary, to have the space that we think is best for these elephants, we needed a lot of it. You couldn't very well have an elephant sanctuary, in your backyard, unless your backyard was vast. On the sanctuary, all the elephants have access to large buildings that provide shelter and resources for the elephants to access. They can come in and out as they choose. They all have individualized stalls within the barn. The barns have padded flooring. They're heated so it's nice and warm in the wintertime. The elephants spend very little time inside during the spring, summer, and fall, a little bit more time inside during the winter, especially at night. An old joke here is that everything at the sanctuary runs on elephant time. So a lot of times we have a plan for what we would like to happen over the course of the day. The elephants have a different plan, and we try to meet somewhere in the middle. And thankfully, we have the ability to be flexible with our planning, because anything can change based on what sort of a mood Flora's in, or what Billy's up to today. So a typical day for an elephant, the biggest chunk of it is spent acting wild, foraging, looking for food, playing in one of our ponds, interacting with other elephants, lying down, taking a nap, just exploring. Those are all regular daily activities for the elephants. This is not a zoo, this is not a park. There's lots of wonderful zoos and parks all over the country where you can go and physically see an elephant, but that's not what our mission is. That's not what we were created for. Once they come and live with us, their public life is behind them. They're no longer going to be put on display, and we think it's just better for the elephant's overall physical, mental, psychological well-being not to have lots of spectators around. Our goal, our focus here is primarily on the well-being of the elephants for whom we care, and that is where our focus will remain. The fact that these elephants are willing to display trust and patience, curiosity, that they're willing to sort of let down their guard and let down their anxiety around humans, when in many cases they have every right to be completely suspicious of anything that a human around them is doing. I'll say the opinion of every elephant of a human certainly depends on that elephant's experience. We have some elephants here. Billy, one of our Asian elephants, is a great example. When she got here, she seemed to be an elephant that was just enveloped by anxiety. Like, she just seemed like she was in a constant state of, just ready for something bad to happen at any times all around her. And we think it's because that was the life that she lived for so long. So to see that elephant start to walk a little bit farther each day, start to show curiosity towards the other elephants, get in our pond and splash around and just goof off for an hour, which she may have never done before, or certainly not for many, many years. Just to see those little things, it's very inspiring for us. I think what I get from that is to see just go, okay, just to see these elephants just be themselves and think, okay, gosh, that's almost what you would see in the wild. That's really, I think, the best case scenario that we hope for. I would like for humans, you, me, anybody that comes in here to visit, to realize that we are keystone species as well, and we have a huge impact on the wild world around us, whether we realize that or not. And I would like for this Elephant Discovery Center, I'd like for the stories of these amazing animals, in some cases, to be the entry point to having that conversation, to thinking about how we fit to the world around us, and making more informed decisions as a keystone species, and that those decisions would create better lives for elephants everywhere.
If you spend the day fishing in Tellico, you might catch a trophy-sized trout, but they didn't get that way by accident. Jonathan Ellis, a biologist with TWRA, gives us a closer look at what it takes to keep these fish going with the flow.
I think that historically the Tellico River was probably fished because it was where it is. It's in the mountains. People wanted to come up and have a beautiful day of fishing with their family in the mountains. And it just went from generation to generation. I mean, we see it all the time. I think it's just something that has established itself as a very, very high quality fishing stream and a very beautiful environment to spend the day. Tellico is a very, very unique area. It's a very clean mountain stream. It has a lot of very clean tributaries that are capable of maintaining wild trout streams and native species such as the southern Appalachian brook trout. I would say that it was originally selected just for those very reasons. I mean, you had a source of water, a demand for the fish, and the ability to, grow them here. My name is Jonathan Ellis. I'm a fisheries biologist with Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, and I'm also the manager of Tellico Hatchery in Tellico Plains, Tennessee. Traditionally, this area, and not a lot of people know this, it was logged. It was heavily logged. During that time period, I think that's when the fishing and the fishery really started up here. Originally, there was only 6 round rearing pools. We've greatly expanded the facility. At maximum capacity right now, we will have almost 200,000 fish on site at any given time when we are full. These are concrete raceways. We typically try to keep about 5,000 fish in each one of these raceways. When the fish come in from the federal hatcheries, they will be stocked directly into this, and they will stay there, be fed and cared for there until we stock them. We have rainbow trout and brown trout, and then our southern Appalachian brook trout. We do have our albino rainbow trout. They are still a rainbow trout, but they are albinos. We typically try to start getting them in May. At that point in time, we'll start them on a very scheduled feeding regimen and put size on them very quickly. We'll monitor the fish, we'll sample them, we adjust the feed regimen accordingly, and then we'll begin to take those fish and every Thursday take them out and stock them in Tellico River, Citico Creek, and then we also have a bi-weekly stocking of 7 other streams in Polk County, Tennessee. As our operation has expanded, we've also been able to outsource some of these quality fish to other streams throughout the state. So instead of just having, a centralized one area here where you're having above average quality fish, we've been able to send out some of our fish to other places to improve the quality of them as well. A trout hatchery, no two could really be considered the same. We are what you would more so consider to be a rearing station, being that we don't typically hatch most of our fish. Our fish will come from a federal hatchery. We also do some fish propagation, that is with the southern Appalachian brook trout. That's Tennessee's only native trout species. Those fish are native to high gradient streams that are very susceptible to volatile changes in weather, water flow. I mean, there's a lot of things that can affect their ability to reproduce and survive from year to year. We're helping that species to survive. And so instead of being something that you just read about that once existed, it's something that you can hike a mile up a stream and catch for yourself. So a fish hatchery is primarily used to supplement fish in rivers and streams throughout the state, or throughout the country really. A typical stocking day here during our harvest season, we'll start at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and we'll make about 180 stops. These fish just don't get stocked in a few places. There's a person on the back of the truck, a truck driver, and we are physically stocking these with a net in the river. It takes all day. It's not unusual to see a 12 to 14 hour day when you're making that many stops. So there's not many places that do that. As far as the location goes, your quickest way from this facility to the nearest civilization, which is still a pretty good distance for what I consider to be modern civilization, you're looking at a good 30 to 45 minute drive anyway. And that can be greatly affected by winter. But I will say this, there has never been a stocking day missed on the Tellico River. We stock in snow. We've stocked in 80, 90 mile per hour windstorms where we've had to cut through with chainsaws. It's something that there's a passion for amongst this crew, from me to all the other aquaculturists that are here, and everybody makes sure that the job gets done. Raising trout now is probably as difficult as it's ever been. And yes, absolutely, the weather does influence it. We have seen over the last years a trend in consistently warming of water. So that has made things more challenging, definitely. Sometimes with this being a surface water fed stream, and by that I mean the water that you're seeing run through these raceways behind us is gravity fed from intakes from the Tellico River, Sycamore Creek, and Pheasant Branch. And so we kind of are at mercy at the elements up here. I like knowing that we have given families and individuals a day of their life. I know for a fact that people have came up here and they have had the best day of fishing of their life. They have landed the best fish of their life, and they've come up here and caught nothing and just had a great day with their family. So it's really knowing that what we do brings people to this area and makes them happy and their life more enjoyable is probably the most gratifying part of my job. Tennessee has one of the highest degrees of biodiversity of anywhere in the country, and I do not think that people realize that. It's something that's actually quite spectacular and unique to this area. It's an older area, you know, when it's kind of, you have these guys that are from the out west and our mountains are taller. It's like, okay, ours are older. You know, you can go back and forth about it all day long, but until you really get out and explore it, you really don't realize what we have in our own backyard. And that's been one of the really true fortunate things about working up in this area, is that I have had the opportunity to get out and stomp around and see things that I hadn't seen before, and it's magnificent. It truly is magnificent. I mean, beauty is perceived in many different ways. I mean, you go out west and you see these vast expanses and they are incredible, but you can get off the beaten path here and see something that's just as amazing.
Thanks for joining us for a look at the Volunteer State's wild side. I'm Vicki Lawson. See you on the next Tennessee Life.